The Upper Sioux Community is on the Minnesota near Granite Falls. Megan Ulrich is the community's water quality specialist. Today, she's headed to Hazel Creek, which meanders through the reservation on its way to the Minnesota River.
I sample this body of water monthly during the field season for little critters that live in the water called macroinvertebrates. These particular critters can only survive in really healthy water. And then group 3, these are pollution tolerant organisms, so they can live in any range of the water, good quality water to fairly polluted water. Some of these critters live on the bottoms of rocks, some live in undercut banks, some live on the vegetation that's emerging out of the water. They can't run away from pollution, you know, so they're a very good indicator of water quality. You can see how fast the water is running, so it's carrying a lot of the silt with it, and it's just fine and mucky. It's so fine that it clogs up my 500 micron net. And you can imagine if you have gills, what that does to you.
Megan tests the water for pesticides in Hazel Creek only twice a year. The tests are very expensive.
We have had pesticide hits in 2007, and we have not had a pesticide hit since then. Doesn't mean it's not there, it's just that we don't catch it. It's easy to think of pollution as being like, oh, a chemical in the water like mercury or bacteria, but you know, when we're getting really big rain events and the water's really flashy and we have a large volume of water flowing through the river at once, that's a form of pollution. When you have a lot of siltation or a lot of turbidity, a lot of suspended sediment, that's another form of pollution. When you have so many different impacts, I think there's kind of like a perfect storm for all the life that's in the water.
Growing up along the Minnesota River, the water was clear and, you know, you could see the bottom of the river.
Carrie Schomer is an elder in the Upper Sioux Community. She was born in a village along the river and has been an eyewitness to the river's changes.
Where I lived along the river bottoms down there, we used to go swimming in it. The turtles, you know, they would, you know, sometimes they would just come up and they'd be looking at you, you know, and then they'd go down and all those things living in the water like that. My dad used to put out set lines and they would catch nice fish. It was good, clean. We used to eat everything out of that river. It can be used in that.
Carrie grew up speaking the Dakota language.
Sota means, you know, this clear. Minnesota. The translation for that is the reflection of the sky in the water. They translate it as the sky blue waters. And you know that the river is not sky blue anymore. It used to be.
This is just nuts to see the devastation on this bank and here, and just you can see how many trees have come down because the bank's gone. Just think about all the sediment coming out of this little creek. And you can see how turbid it is now. You can't see.
The Water Resources Center at Minnesota State University, Mankato, also keeps track of what's happening at Hazel Creek and other tributaries of the Minnesota River.
We're involved with river and lake studies, monitoring water quality, looking at chemistry and biota. Water Resource Center, the SCOT.
The center collects data and publishes a report on the trends in water quality.
We do the State of the Minnesota River report, which comes out every 2 years. There are some trends that are improving, like phosphorus. We also know that some trends are static, like mussels.
Mussels, at one stage in their life, have to live in the gills of fish and amphibians. Because of the way they live and that they are filter feeders and travel on the bottom of the body of water, they're very sensitive to pollution and siltation. Oh, and I brought some of my mussel shells collected previously. We happen to know that many mussels are locally extinct in the Minnesota River.
At one time, historically, there was 42 mussels found in the Minnesota River Basin. Now we only find 23. But we also know that that 23 has been fairly stable for the last 10, 15 years. And some trends like nitrates, we know that they're rising. So it's kind of a mixed bag. We see positive trends, we see trends that are basically stable, and we see some trends that are continuing to go down.
Lake Titlow in the city of Gaylord in Sibley County is a shallow prairie lake threatened by high levels of nitrogen, the fertilizer often applied to cornfields in the watershed.
It has a problem with sediment, it has a problem with chlorophyll, it has a problem with rough fish, it's got lots of problems, but Our big reason for being here is that it contributes water to the Minnesota River, which is another impaired waterway. And
it is our state's namesake river, and it's been nationally publicized as a river that's threatened and at risk. And I think we have a responsibility with what happens to how we treat the water that flows through our backyards and how it impacts people in other parts of the country.
We need to come back up into the watershed. So we're high on the prairie, many, many miles from the Minnesota River, but here's where we need to try to make the water cleaner. There's been ongoing efforts by the community of Gaylord to clean their water for 40 years. The city itself has gone to extraordinary lengths over the last few years to make sure that their storm sewers don't drain into the lake anymore. And the business end is supposed to point forward, right? So today we're here to install the weather and water quality monitoring station in Lake Titlow. The station allows us to link water quality parameters with weather parameters. How fast the rain falls has a lot to do with how much mud washes into the lake. That instrument that we lower into the lake tells us the temperature, the pH, the amount of oxygen in the water, the amount of solid mud that's suspended in the water, and it's hooked up to that modem, and we can call it up day and night and see what the lake's doing. We first post it on our websites at Minnesota State Mankato for everyone to see, so that people who live in the community can become engaged. You put in 400 milliliters of the ferric.
Okay.
And
I grew up along the Minnesota River, and I'm extremely interested in learning more about this watershed and what is affecting this watershed and what I can do as a citizen to help improve the water quality and improve the environment that I live in. In the lab today, we analyzed a sample from Lake Titlow. We began by collecting the sample, and then we kept it refrigerated, and we took 10 milliliters of that sample and placed it in a cuvette. We were hoping to find out the chloride levels in the lake, and this is part of an ongoing project at Lake Titlow.
Where, when, and by what processes the nutrients in the mud are washing into the lake. Once we understand that, we'll be able to go attack those problem areas and potentially do something about cleaning up the lake. A lake that's back to being a fishery, a lake that's back to being a waterfall habitat, a lake that can be used for recreation, for swimming and boating purposes. Right now, this lake doesn't meet any of those purposes.
Is it possible that this is where we had the news conference in '92?
Arnie Carlson said in 1992, we need to be able to swim, we need to be able to fish, picnic, recreate in this Minnesota River Basin.
But isn't that beautiful?
Frankly, any river being polluted is a disgrace. And from a policy perspective, in terms of governmental management, can agencies work together towards some common goals, knowing full well that there's a lot of give and take? You know, the word compromise is not accepted in all political quarters these days, and that's unfortunate, but
there are a wide variety of things that citizens can do to help improve the quality of the water in their lakes. If you have a lake, if you have a stretch or a reach of river near you and the water quality is impaired, it's low quality water, speak up, say something. Tell your representative, tell your local watershed district manager, start making noise.
Clearly, Minnesotans throughout the valley have taken up the challenge of cleaning up the river and its tributaries. Lots of issues out there, but folks like Bryce haven't given up hope.
Sibley County, originally had 85+% wetland cover and currently has 1%. But if we could put back into wetlands some of that open space on the west side of the lake, the place where the mud and the nutrients are coming from, we have a chance of holding back those nutrients in that mud and without spending a ton of money.
Well, I think the biggest concern is just trying to get people to be engaged into the river. That's going to decide whether we continue to improve water quality.
Maybe now we might have the knowledge that we've been acquiring here, the driving force by the community members, plus the financial support from the state in order to actually start doing something about the amount of sediment and the nutrients that wash into this lake.
It has to be all of us involved. It's all of those people that live in that watershed. If we can bring Lake Titlow back, we can restore the quality of the water in one of these giant shallow lakes in southern Minnesota so that other people are inspired to go out and try to do the same thing.